Stop the press demo. 2-for-1 tickets to the Wellness Summit are open.
After not one, not two, but 3 solid events, Marcus, the Wellness Summit returns to Melbourne in 2016 for 2 days of powerhouse wellness with your favourite wellness couch host and Australia's wellness elite.
Join us at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre on September 10th and 11th for an inspirational, educational, fun, exciting, sensational cocktail of wellness that promises to help you take your life to the next level.
Now, 2-for-1 tickets to the summit are extremely limited and won't be available for long, so make sure you go to www.thewellnesssummit.com right now and get in whilst you can.
This will be the biggest summit on record, folks. You'll see 1,000 people there. You do not want to miss this one.
Pop the date to the diary and see you there.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today we're talking about embracing your wild woman. Now it sounds so, like unleashing, doesn't it? You know? But what really inspired this topic was the idea of, I guess, 2 things. You can't heal what you can't feel. And the pathway to connection with yourself and with others is through vulnerability. So often we are cultured as women into shutting down our emotions or stifling those tears or those overwhelming feelings that come up. But yet when we can be with them, there is an enormous amount of healing and release that's possible through that expression. And so I really wanted to, I guess, talk through both of us, some of our experiences around doing that, and also working with other women, what we've been able to see them shift through them, giving themselves permission to be in that space.
Where emotion is acceptable and really sought after as the sweet point of connection.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's where healing happens, right? When we get really authentic about what is underlying the stuff that's going wrong or the stuff that we're not happy with or the thing that doesn't feel quite right, when we actually sit into and feel into the real vulnerability and authenticity of what that actually feels and means and ripples out into our life to be, tears flow up. And they can be tears of inspiration and gratitude as much as they can be tears of pain and suffering.
Yeah, and just tears that just need to be released.
Yes.
And it can even happen in...
Because that's the thing, right? Tears are healing.
Yes.
We as women heal when we let our bodies, I suppose, weep for our souls. When we really allow that emotion to be so intense that we can't contain it anymore and it flows out of us through that process of tears and sitting in that and having that space held, we process and flow out all of those feelings and all of those pain and ripples around what that's meant in your life and where it's led you. And it allows us to then be in a place of either peace and gratitude with it or in healing and letting go of it.
And sometimes it might not even be that you fully clear whatever that was, but it just allows you to bring awareness to it so that it no longer has the hold on you that it perhaps previously has if it's something painful. I have a recent experience of it where I was sitting in a really big dark place of fear around my pregnancy, and this is something that comes and goes, right? And I think it's probably consistent for a lot of women because it's such a time of, learning to let go, that's no longer just about you. And
because isn't this the perfection of pregnancies? It's the biggest or even conception, it's the biggest lesson in vulnerability and lack of control, because you don't even have control over your own body anymore.
No.
Let alone the outcome.
And this is what I love about the perfection in our biology too, is that it's just preparing you for becoming a mother, and for having, your heart walking outside of you in that child that you're going to prepare to birth.
And the surrender and the let go that happens.
And so, I just really felt like I was, I dedicated a day to working and I just couldn't work. I just could not get in that headspace. I was gripped by fear. I wasn't in my body. And I thought, yes, okay.
I so celebrate you recognising that.
Yeah.
That in itself is massive, as opposed to run on autopilot and just keep chugging away and stuffing those feelings down or ignoring them. To actually have enough presence and knowledge to know I need to sit with this and see what it is, that it's not going away unless I'm with it.
It was really profound, and I think it was also one of those pivotal times where whether you make a choice, you make a choice to get on with it. I mean, sometimes we have to. Sometimes we don't have the flexibility to opt out of what's going on around us and give ourselves that presence. And same thing with our children. Sometimes we don't have the opportunity to give them the presence when they're caught in emotion.
It is about coming back to it, though, and creating the space and the intention
to process that. And so this particular day I was working at my mum's house and she was looking after my son, and it was great because I had him taken care of, and I just said, look, I'm just going to go for a walk. The minute I stepped out the front door, I could feel the tears coming up. And I just wept, and I wailed for this walk that took me probably over an hour. And I was walking without a destination. I was walking to heal, and it was so powerful to let myself go. To really let those tears come up, and I could feel all these times probably back in my childhood where I felt those feelings come up, but I would shove them down. Because so often tears are not okay. They're not. Like, as women, and I think even as, boys get this too, there's not a space to process feelings, and, you need to get on with it. And I didn't want to. I knew that for myself and for my baby and particularly, I'm having a baby girl, so that to me is also about owning my feminine and really sitting in that space and allowing that to overcome me. And it was beautiful because I probably cried for maybe 20 minutes of that walk and really let it go. And then I felt an enormous sense of peace once I'd let that out. And then I began to heal. I began to understand what those tears are trying to communicate with me. I began to balance my sort of perceptions around what I was feeling. I looked at the environment and the wind around me to give me answers, and it was just an incredibly grounding, healing experience where I could walk back into that house and have shifted so much just from doing that. And so I really invite other women to listen to what's going on for them and to embrace that part of yourself that sometimes just needs to own that incredibly vulnerable place of letting go. And I mean, sometimes it can be, we can even scare ourselves sometimes with the emotion that can bubble up from inside of us. And I think sometimes our children can trigger that for us too, can't they? Because they often, especially young children, don't have they haven't dampened it yet. They experience the fullness of it. And they're teaching us to do that for ourselves, which I think is really beautiful.
So beautiful. I just welled up with tears when you were talking about that just release and just immersing yourself in that feeling and allowing it to flow out from you, because that is so rare and such a gift for a woman to give herself, that it just fills me with such gratitude that I just want to weep at the perfection and the sadness and the sorrow and the pain and the journey that leads to of connection and enlightenment and leaving behind what doesn't serve you anymore. I just love that. The other thing the wild woman concept, since we've titled it that, really means to me is the wild woman really speaks to the instinctual woman. So when you're talking about a woman that's in touch with her emotions and allows them to flow freely out of her and through her, is a woman that is in touch with her intuition and is guided by that. And so the wild woman really is essentially that inner you that is guided by your inner guiding post, that ability to connect in and know this serves me and this doesn't. And it is much letting things flow out from you and through you as it is putting in place boundaries and protecting your space, and your self-worth is aligned with that, right? So this came up a lot in our retreat yesterday and reminded me so deeply of how important our boundaries are as women.
Yes.
Because we are, taught and schooled to so deeply give ourselves outward.
To first be of service.
To first be of service at the expense of what selfish you desires, right?
Yeah.
And so as women, and particularly when we're stepping through into motherhood, and even if this is not classic motherhood of, you know, you mothering your child, you will be mothering in another format, right? As came up yesterday in our retreat. Your mothering is not non-existent because you don't have children.
Yeah.
Your mothering exists in a different form. So where are you giving, you know, without boundaries in an act of service around you? It will be to your work, to your business, to your clients, to your sister, to your family, to your mother. There will be mothering that you do intensively and put above, I suppose, even what your needs are. So that's mother in shadow, I suppose. So the flip side of the mothering energy is that ability to not know when enough is enough and when to hold on to your own energy and your own space, when that act of service just is at your deficit. So it really reminded me yesterday that being an instinctual wild woman is as much that feminine, you know, queen-like ability to rule with compassion and empathy and allow feelings to flow outwards, as it is being the warrior woman and the crone archetype of holding on to your space and your boundaries because you are worthy.
And it's those two things, really, isn't it? Because it's the willingness to express wholeheartedly and with vulnerability, and then it's the conviction to stand by what's true for you. And I mean, often that side of the wild woman steps up when you perceive you're being oppressed in some way, or your child is being oppressed in some way.
Yes.
It's when that fiery...
Yes, and she creeps up, doesn't she, when someone asks you to do something or expects you to do something, or you expect yourself to do something that really isn't fitting for you.
Yeah.
That somewhere in your gut, in your belly, in that little internal voice or flicker of emotion says, this doesn't serve me right now, I don't want to do it. And when we choose to ignore that instinctual self, when we choose to do those things and shut that down and not listen to it, we don't ever do them in the wholehearted service that would be healing and flow outwards in grace and gratitude.
It would be loving and of service to that
There's always a bit of a ribbing and a bit of a, you know, disconnect or a, you know, an anger kind of facilitation that goes with that. So in the end, does it serve to serve? And of course the answer is no. But the hard part for women to put their boundaries back in place is that it so deeply aligns with their sense of self-worth, with their sense of deserving, that we most likely have spent years or decades covering over about how deserving we are of pleasure and space and time and help. How deserving are you of those things? Because that is where your boundaries
And that's
lie.
where, you know, your clarity or lack of clarity will dictate the world around you, because your inner world, well, your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. So where you don't value yourself and where your self-worth is low, that's a vibration that's going to reflect outwards to those relationships and things that are happening around you. You know, where you judge others as not giving you the time and space that you really need. Well, are you willing to give yourself permission to have that first? Because they're only reflecting you.
Isn't this funny too? Because we don't actually realise until we start to expect to deserve those things and in fact put in place a conscious effort of protecting that space and doing those things for ourselves, or expecting that those around us and putting those steps in place, being really clear in your communications about what you need and how to facilitate that to receive it. Then people start going, okay. Because until we stop and say to our partners, to our colleagues, to our mother, I really need to look after me right now. I really need to prioritise me right now. They're not going to do it because they're going to keep running the way that you're running.
Yeah.
So it's actually getting vulnerable and authentic enough, right? Which is the instinctual wild woman, to know this is what I need right now. To be the most wholehearted, giving, loving, sensual and seductive woman that I can be, I need to be able to be in touch and tap into what I really deeply need and desire. And that starts with the simple questions. That starts with, what do I really want for breakfast right now? What do I really want to do with this hour? What is it that I really need right now when the kids have gone to bed and the house is quiet and you could go and watch TV? Or you could spend just a moment to check in. What do you really want? If it's really you want to just tune out and have a cuddle on the couch and watch some TV, you go for that.
Yeah.
But what if it's actually really not? But you get busy on your autopilot of cleaning the house and cleaning the kitchen because no one else will do it unless you do it.
Which is reaffirming the reality, right? As long as you have that belief, that's going to continue to be what's reflecting back.
Until you get to the point of really knowing what you need and being able to speak that to yourself first and then to the outside world, it's not coming back to you.
And I think I'd really ask listeners at this point to sit with how it feels to view yourself asking that question of somebody or saying to somebody, I really need to prioritize me right now. And if that feels scary and uncomfortable and vulnerable, then there's really work for you to do around that. To really sit with, what are the benefits to me and those I love for me to set these boundaries? Because at the moment, you're probably seeing it as a drawback to them, and in some ways a drawback to you for you to own that. And maybe that's because, you know, in doing that, it's going to bring up big feelings that perhaps you've become expert at hiding, you know, through certain things that you do on autopilot, whether that's cleaning, whether that's always making yourself busy by serving other people, because serving other people distracts you from yourself. It's an interesting one to ponder the feelings that come up as we talk through these concepts.
Because they're massive, aren't they? And they even bring up bigger discussions and emotions around dynamics and relationships with which are programming that. So sometimes we'll avoid that to avoid ourselves, to avoid, you know, like it's just this really perfect perception that's led to where you are right now. The question is, moving forwards, you're at a crossroads in the sand, right? You're drawing that line. Do I want to continue to bring these belief systems over that line with me? Do they still serve me now? I see how they've served me in the past. So getting busy, having a tidy house, doing the cleaning, serving all of those around me, how have they benefited me getting into gratitude and grace with how that has actually served you? So sure, you might be burnt out, you might hate it at times, but it will still have served you.
Absolutely.
It will serve you by the relationships that you've created through that, the tenacity or the belief systems that you've created within yourself in achieving those things.
The sense of conviction that you've got about getting things done.
The motivation that it provides, or the impetus to actually do it. You might not hate it, not like doing it, but it gets you doing it still, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that still serves you. So did I just say the relationships before that it creates around you, where it has led you, the people it's brought into your life, holding those beliefs that otherwise would not, or in converse, the people that have exited your life because you can't live with them anymore because of those belief systems, because that still serves, right?
Yeah, and sometimes we don't always realise the things that we've unconsciously put in place to facilitate that, where almost we don't sometimes have to remove those people from our lives, they remove themselves.
Because they can't live with that anymore.
Yeah, by virtue of your behaviour.
Having this trait, which is perfect, right?
Exactly, and so when you can start to look at how you have orchestrated the things that are happening in your life to get you to a certain point, and you really, really see it, you really almost want to be reflecting on how much of a genius you are in some ways to have fulfilled the outcomes in which you desire.
And right, if cleaning is also your autopilot, or gardening for getting busy and distracting yourself from emotion and feeling, how has that served you? Because I bet even in creating less vulnerability, that has served you. Has it changed the relationship that you're in or were in? Has it changed the way that you relate to the people around you and the peers that you hold, or how you go about your life because of that level of vulnerability or service?
It's like that classic thing where, you know, a woman really unhappy or bitching about her husband, for example, because he never does anything, often can help her build a great friendship group.
Yes, because it really creates ties and connections. A sense of bonding to other women or connection or external circle that otherwise would not be there. Because if you have a totally blissful, loved up, intimate relationship, are you as connected to your external circle? Probably not.
Probably not. And potentially you may alienate some of those women who otherwise would be your kind of tribe because they don't have that.
So doesn't the dysfunction in families and in relationships serve, because what are you getting out of it? What's the benefit? What are the relationships? What are the depth of those relationships that if you didn't have that ribbing would not be there? Because don't we as women also connect through the hard stuff?
Yes.
And you and I have said this, right? We've gone through stuff in our lives or with our kids, and all of a sudden I go, well, I can't judge that anymore because shit, I'm here.
Yeah, totally.
And doesn't that serve, right?
Absolutely.
Because this whole demographic of women and sisters who I love now, right, I would not have had I not got into, I don't know, grace and beyond the judgment, beyond myself, really, beyond my ego, to really see what's going on there and meet them on that level.
And that's right, because we can never be of service unless we're not continually learning ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, we can never be, and you know, your greatest gift is to give that of which comes so effortlessly natural to you. But when I say effortlessly natural, there's still a massive learning component and a journey within that.
Right, so here's the thing with genius, right, is whatever your genius zone is also the area of your life where you have the most challenge.
Yes.
Because you are constantly, soulfully growing.
So that, and that's this idea of this paradox, right?
Isn't it a paradox,
It's a paradox,
right? Is it's genius and it's perfection and it's inspiration, but it's also
massive
fucking
challenge.
hard.
And it's probably, the focus in your life that is, the most ribbing.
Yes.
And you know who your
because
tribe,
you do the most growth.
Yes, but your tribe is often the people who are 3 to 10 years behind where you are now, because you have worked through the tools and have them at your disposal in some ways effortlessly to communicate, but you're still on the journey. It's just that little bit further.
Yes.
And it's like, the perfection of this is leading up into, our retreat. I've been really had my buttons pushed by my almost 3-year-old, like never before almost. And I'm saying to Julie, I should just have the tools for this, right? Listen to my shooting. And she said to me the perfect thing, because she's like, yeah, but you've never had a 3-year-old before. Remember, he's triggering you at that age. You've already moved through him at 1, which was you at 1 at that age, 2, which is 2 at you, which is 2 at you at that age. Now you're coming to that next quantum, really, that next evolution of yourself and him.
Which, how fucking hard is that with parenting, right? Which is kind of, I'm laughing because it's kind of ironic to me that we get into this challenge and we scramble and we scrape together and we, cry and rage about how difficult it is, and we find our toolkit and we kind of get this moment of peace. And then the same thing happens again in a different form. Yeah. It's like this constant, guess what? Here's you now, right? I'm going through the teenage thing, right?
Yes.
Here's you as a teenager. Go deal with that. And I'm like, shit, I just got through the other stuff. I thought I had it nailed. And so when you were saying that to me, it was my perfect mirror too, because I was like, yeah, of course though, right? Because you've never been, in inverted commas, 3 before. So here you go. Here's your first round at 3. And then when your daughter comes to you, you get a second round at 3.
Yes.
So the stuff that did trigger you that you've worked through no longer is a trigger for you anymore.
No.
But she'll come with a different learning.
Yeah.
And a different level.
Because she's expressed, the thing is, she's coded with different stuff. So we've talked before this idea of, at conception, your children will express what you've repressed. So when I was pregnant with Hugo, I was repressing different stuff that he was going to express. With this baby, again, totally different set of stuff going on. Yeah. So that's why your children are going to be so perfectly designed to help you grow. Yes. In essence. Yes. As uncomfortable as that growth is.
And that is also why I put such a huge amount of emphasis on resourcing your parenting toolkit, because it actually never ends.
Yes.
You don't actually get to a point where you go, got this nailed.
Yeah, you never get parenting nailed.
Got the whole toolkit. Because every time they grow, and with each child, they bring a different set of challenges. Yeah. And so if you're really wanting to, one, really use them as your mirrors to heal yourself, which is what the perfection in that dynamic is, if we can really do that. Because when we do that within ourselves, they automatically shift without us needing to do something to them.
Yes.
We can work with them, but in doing that,
and it also allows them to be much more of their own person, because you're more aware of putting your stuff onto them.
So your stuff, their stuff. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we really encourage you as mothers to reach out when you're getting stuck, because we're all there and we have a tribe around us that can help us, because that's also the perfection of our tribe and the connections we form, is there's always a toolkit there. And like, the retreats that we're doing, we've also now decided we're setting up an intimate Facebook group. So once you've done the retreat, then there's a communication tool there.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that tribe when you post a question or a problem that you're having, the wisdom that's coming back to you?
Yes.
Like, where is your tribe?
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, you know, like what we found even yesterday, and I'm looking forward to connecting with everybody again today, the mirrors in that room were amazing.
Perfection.
Like, we are talking, like, jaw-dropping, oh my God, like, I see myself so much in you. And the beauty of that is that it helps everyone to share, to heal, to grow.
We learn through story.
Yes. It was just incredibly powerful. But, you know, on the topic of this wild woman, I would really say embrace it in your parenting too, because I think so often as mothers, we're always thinking in the back of our head,
it's
like,
this Virgin Mary archetype almost, isn't it? This, you know, beautiful, soft-spoken, never angry, always has the right tools and the right words at the right time, which is just unobtainable, really. And particularly when you're talking about the woman, when you are really owning your woman, your she is like a spectrum. She is as much the highs and the joys and the central explosion as she is the depth and the dark and the, you know, witch protection of boundaries and that, you know, that flip where she'll slap you if you're doing the wrong thing. She is that full spectrum. That is the wild woman. The ability to let go of the beliefs that we have that control each one of those patternings and allow ourselves to ebb and flow with our cycle, with our feelings, with the mirrors that are happening around us. And that is the essence.
And also really using those experiences of, you know, intense rage where you yell at your child, or whether you can't be around them because you're so triggered by it. Use those as well as learning opportunities and teaching opportunities with your children to expose them to the full spectrum of human emotion and then be encouraged to own those emotions within themselves. Because, you know, we live in a world that really encourages the repression of those things, when in fact it's really healthy to do both repression and expression. You know, expressing them in a healthy way when it's safe, you know, and helping to school them with the tools to do that.
So I think if you've listened to previous podcasts I talked about with my son, we have the list of his way back to balance. Write yourself a list. What is your way back to balance? Because when you've hit that point and you are getting triggered, yes, okay, you'll have the odd moment where you're going to, you know, unleash that, and in some way that's in the reverse kind of healing your inner child, but not in a healthy way. If we can get to the point where we can then come back to that yelling or that incident that is sitting very heavily within us with guilt, and say to our child, I am really immensely sorry, you didn't deserve that. I was feeling really this, and this was really going on for me, and what I didn't do was these things. And I really should have. And I'm going to try really hard to do these things, and I'm really sorry that you were involved on that, or you were caught up in that, or that I did that to you. It's not okay. It's not okay with mummy. And so it is coming back to that if you have had that moment of unleashing, but it's also knowing when that is happening. So again, that I think we did a podcast on triggers. It's recognizing when your trigger is happening and removing yourself from your child, because even though they've triggered you, they're not there for you to unleash on them.
Totally,
But it's perfect because they've awakened, right? It's the straw that broke the camel's back. They've awakened it within you. Remove yourself and deal with it. So that can be rage, screaming, running. And you could do some of those things in front of them, right? Sometimes even I've like cranked the music up so loud, I'm sure you would have reports from neighbours. And it's so loud, I can't hear anybody but the music. And I dance. And I dance wildly. And guess what? All of my kids come in and join me. And it totally feels amazing because I can't release my anger on them when I'm releasing it myself.
When you've got your own tool to...
When I've got my own tool, and it's coming back and sitting with the vulnerability, it's choosing to be vulnerable enough with my partner, even though sometimes, and it's still a struggle for me, I go, ugh, you're just not going to get it, I'm not even going to bother, so I just won't tell you about it. I have to recognise that as an old patterning for me to shut down, and now I sit there and I sit in
like an excuse you're telling yourself so that you don't have
so I don't
get
have
vulnerable.
to exactly. And I'm projecting that outwards, right? So it's his problem, it's not mine. So how much safer is that for me, right? So my next evolution is to recognise that discomfort in wanting to share that with him and going, ugh, discomfort, okay. And then I nut it out very slowly with him. And it has to be slow because he's not going to make the big leaps that a woman I was sitting with would. But that for me is also, there's lessons in sitting in a longer period of time in that discomfort. And guess what happens at the end of that? There's connection.
Yeah. How beautiful.
How beautiful, right? That's not to say that in that process, though, it hasn't been incredibly challenging and uncomfortable for me, because it has. But that's my growth. Because I'm hitting a wall that I've had up forever. So how profound to say, draw that line in the sand and say, it no longer serves me, because I see that it served me, right, in terms of how it's got me through my teenage years and my 20s and even into my 30s, right? But it no longer does. I recognize that the disconnection and the lack of authenticity that creates, and that kind of fuels a bubble that's kind of silently happening in my relationship, is no longer okay with me.
Yeah, yeah. And that, you know, if you're taking a relationship to that next evolution.
Yeah, I don't want to have conversations or life things that have happened within me that I've had a reaction to or with, that he's not aware of or on that journey of, because there's always going to be a reference to that time or that thing, or there'll be, and if he's bypassed it because I've bypassed him, that creates such disharmony in my relationship. So I recognize that is my patterning. I recognize that is my trigger within my relationship, and there's rage triggers, right, which is what we're talking about with parenting. So it's about recognizing what they are, drawing that line and saying, I see how it served me, and getting into gratitude for where it's brought you right now. But then it's saying, do I still want to carry it with me? Do I still want to take this moving forwards into my life? Or am I ready to leave it? And I'm ready to leave those things.
I think it's also too with relationships getting clear on, you know, making sure that you don't feel like that you always have to. It's finding that balance, isn't it? Because we're always expressing and repressing all things all the time. We're not saying here, learn how to express everything because that's just the better way. Because,
no, it's simply a highlight of the story.
Yeah, that's right. But there's always. It's really following your intuition, isn't it? You know, what is the big thing that you feel is in the way of connection and vulnerability in those relationships, those close
That's
to
true.
you?
What is the thing that's in the way of connection or authenticity, or really being able to be just real?
And again, isolating what that is and choosing to tackle that.
Yes, choosing to actually sit in that discomfort and see what's behind it.
And be aware of when you don't sit in it, when you don't confront it, what are the triggers happening to lead you back to that, because they'll be there too, perhaps in conflict or whatever. Yeah,
definitely. And how does that serve you? How does that keep you more connected to your tribe around you, or more self-sufficient, or...
And sometimes it might be that we're not quite ready yet, and that's okay too. It might be that we're, you know, needing to...
And that we have been in and out of it as well.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm going, man, draw that line in the sand and that's it. When you've got a lifetime of programming, it takes a lot of practice to get to the point of really leaving it. So you're going, it's a trial and error, right? Sometimes you'll try it and you'll nail it.
And it's like that, you know, we talk a lot about peeling back the layers, but you're never done. Like, we're never done.
It just constantly is evolving.
Yeah.
Constantly.
And I think when you get comfortable with that truth, that you're never going to fully have enlightenment, or you're never going to have that constant bliss or happiness. It's just going to be always evolving.
Yes.
There's a real freedom in that.
Yes. Yes. Circle, we really need to come back to what is the wild woman? Who is your wild woman? And what does she look like now? What does she look like in your head? When do you tap into her? When do you avoid her? How do you want to honour her, or how do you want to step into her moving forwards? Because that is what this podcast really, I'm hoping, is resonating with you, is that getting in touch with the spectrum of intuition and the feminine, which is as much the dark and the boundaried as it is the light and the seduction, is the full spectrum. And as soon as you start chopping off one, its sister on the other end starts to diminish and dill down. What am I saying? Dim down. Okay, that's perfect. It's taken us out of that space, that energy shifted up, which is lovely. So we really would love you to connect with us on Nourishing the Mother on Facebook, so / Nourishing the Mother. And Bridget, your connection point is?
Yes, suburbansandcastles.com, and we've got a film coming up, which is The Human Experiment. It's looking at the potential link of chemicals in the environment and health, which would be an interesting and challenging discussion, I think, around that one.
Sounds like a good panel at the end.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting one. I think there'll be some strong opinions, which would be great. We love those ones. And connecting with you, Julie,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com. And what we've realised is that we have music playing in the background today, if you had or had not noticed. And part of that impetus was yesterday at our retreat, I had a playlist on, and quite a few women were going, "What is this? Who is this?" Playlist, and I was saying to Bridget, "What, haven't you got this song? This was my opt-in on my Pleasure Nutritionist page, right? You sign up for my newsletter and you get access to my secret swoon and seduce playlist."
I love it.
Which really was what I had designed, that is the spectrum from the sweetest, just heart-opening, swoonish kind of songs right through to that deep, gritty, sexual, expressive songs.
Yeah.
And I did that because I am a woman that can connect so deeply with music and then resonate and vibrate at that and with that, and in fact will choose songs specific to how I'm feeling to facilitate that.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for women. Music is your inroad. It's your easy access point to exactly what's going on for you and how you're feeling. So use it.
It's a beautiful playlist. I really recommend you get onto. I'm going to get onto it too.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.